Okay, hey, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. For the audience directly, please engage, ask questions. You can always raise your hand here at Zoom, or you can write questions in the chat. So please engage in the next hour. I'm Leah, I'm a PhD student, and I'm a member of the Crastina crew. And in the last months, we focused on the scientific publishing system and what's going wrong and how we can improve this. And we also want to discuss these today at our panel discussion here with our great panel. We have Liz, she's the Strategic Initiatives Director from F1000. And then there's also Josh here. He is the founder of SiteAI and also of the platform Winnower. And then we have also Christoph here. He's the chief editor from eNeuro, an online open science journal. And then we have also Maria from Junk. That's probably the most unknown journal here. It's a journal of unsolved questions. And it's started by students and PhD students to publish negative results. And then last but not least, Hannes Feirer, our winner of the competition, Crastina competition. And to start us off, Hannes, do you want to present your flowchart that you handed in at our Crastina panel?
Yes, I'd gladly do that. Are you going to share it?
Yes.
There it is.
Can you see it?
Yes, thank you. There's a lot of text. I don't expect anyone to read that. I can just guide you through it. So the problem I wanted to address is that most of the work we do in the lab, and I just pretend I know what everyone is doing now, but this is at least my experience and I think many of my colleagues. The problem is that most of the work we do is never published, but it is somehow ending up in drawers or just never finds its way into a paper. And I think that's a problem for a few reasons. One is because, after all, taxpayers often fund the science to, in the end, to get this knowledge back into society wherever it ends up. And with us not publishing that, we're kind of not doing our end of the deal. Also, I think science that is not part of a big story paper is valuable often. They might be reproductions, and so therefore it might not end up in a paper, or it's just very exploratory. And this is another reason why experiments may not end up in a paper, even though they're completely valid and completely sound science and well done. And last but not least, I think it's a concern in a way, is that when only hunting for big papers, us scientists in the lab, we kind of miss out on a lot of positive feedback on this moment when you publish something and you created something and you put it out there. For us, that happens maybe every few years as the individual people in the lab, PhD students, postdocs. For the professor, maybe a bit more often. But with publishing more often, I think we get more positive feedback in the lab. So these were a few aspects now I threw out there. I can run you through the flowchart I created here. And if any of you now think, well, this looks a lot like nano-publications, micro-publications, there's a lot of name for these. That's exactly true. I think that's where I took some of the inspiration and tried to put a bit of a spin on it. So I think what I envisioned would work something like a researcher runs an experiment, or maybe a set of experiments that belong close enough together, like maybe a replica of the same thing, or something like I think everyone who's just doing science can think of a single experiment as one entity, maybe larger or smaller. And what usually follows is that we as scientists then upload this to our local electronic lab notebook. There are many out there, and every university has their own. But in the end, our work kind of has to be there to stay there and to be picked up later for publication. Now, what I'm thinking is that exactly this piece of science that should be good, valid science, replicated with proper analysis and all of that, could be uploaded to a database where it could be collected, some kind of publication platform. Not a journal per se, I think, but maybe one of the many alternative platforms for publication that are now out there. I think they would qualify for these things, or another one. And these entries then, of course, would contain all the necessary information, the raw data, so things could potentially be replicated, at least the analysis. Scripts, there is a typo, interesting, for analysis, whatever might have been done. And of course, all the methodological detail and then all these things. What I think is not necessary is an elaborate introduction and motivation for the work, putting it into context, and maybe background of the field and all these things, and also not a discussion how this fits in context, how the results fit in context with the field overall. I think data can stand for itself before it's being put in context, because that's, I guess, an interpretation which goes beyond the data itself. This then, of course, could be peer-reviewed, and I imagine this would be rather fast, because one individual experiment is rather fast to peer review compared to a paper of 20, 30 pages. And also the peer review should be kind of concise and fast. I can quickly talk about the criteria for those. I think what is most important is, of course, that the methods are executed correctly as far as a reviewer can tell. This goes for the system we have now as well. And if the conclusion follows the data, this is where, I guess, yeah, the actual science comes in. And what I think is not necessary for publication is that the results or the experiments, that the experiment is novel. It's, of course, completely valid for other people who have done this before. And the impact that is often kind of like the gateway of the editor, I think that's not relevant either in such a case. And of course, also all the context, I think, shouldn't be relevant. So just a self-containing, well-done experiment. And if it's sound science, it would pass this threshold. And later on, once we have enough or all the experiments that we want peer-reviewed, we can put this into a larger context and kind of make a more conventional story paper out of it, which could then be published and maybe, I guess I want to say belong or kind of contribute to a field more than individual experiments can, because of course someone has to interpret them and kind of put them into context a lot. So I think that's still relevant, but just not for every single experiment, but then for a collection of those. And this can vary. And I think this is where they can be interesting for all these platforms that we see now. For example, I think maybe we might talk about how F1000 is approaching peer review, and with maybe post-publication peer review, I think that might also be relevant here. And of course, also new versions of citing papers. Maybe we will also talk about that later. I think there are some advantages in that. And the main benefit, again, is that all the science we do, all the valid science we have done will be out there, will be searchable, and it will make it easier for people to know what has been done, what hasn't been done. And maybe we as scientists get more frequent feeling of satisfaction of having done something valuable, which is, I think, is not to be underestimated in the daily life of the lab. Thank you. I think that's it.
Thank you, Hannes. I have directly a first question for you. Would you also publish with an experiment that did not work or have negative results?
I think when maybe we have to define what we mean by that, because I think people mean different things when they say they did not work. If you mean by that the outcome did not match your expectations, then yes, as long as everything is valid and sound. And that's what I meant with the science has to be done well. Obviously, in a case where, let's say, maybe you're taking microscopy pictures and someone's bumping the table, your experiment didn't work, but you shouldn't publish it because the confound is obvious. But other than that, I think, of course, it's absolutely important that we publish negative data and things that did not match our expectation, but we do not find a reason why it didn't work. Maybe there's something valuable there.
Thanks. If it's so important to publish negative results, then the question is, why don't we see it more often? Like, why don't we see negative results published regularly? Maria, do you want to share your thoughts about this?
Yeah, well, since I'm from the Journal of Unsolved Questions, and this journal kind of focuses on publishing negative results. And I must admit, we have really hard times now because we don't have particularly many submissions of scientific articles. And we attribute that to the fact that, well, the researcher still needs to work on the manuscript to make it sound and explain the research they have done, to explain the results, even though these are null or negative results. and it's still a lot of work, whilst there are other results that were more positive, that were more high impact, perhaps, that could be published in Nature paper or Science. So we kind of acknowledge that people may prefer to work with more high impact results than that. And with this regard, of course, this idea is really cool, although I have a concern about integrity of researchers. Like, if you publish not only the data, but also the metadata, all the parameters of the experiments, there may be some people who would just, take it as the basis and just continue from there, and it's not going to be super fair also. So I guess this could be one of the concerns of the whole scientific society.
Do you mean, if I could just try to respond, that someone would take one experiment and link it to their own and kind of move from there without acknowledging what is done before, or without seeking collaboration? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's like one of the better scenario. But I meant that just people could just take the data and then sell them as their data, kind of.
Yeah, because this conduct might always be a thing. Yeah. But are you then generally opposed to publishing raw data in repositories and wherever we have these?
No, I'm totally supporting that. And yeah, I do that myself, and I highly recommend everybody doing that. And yeah, it is hard though, because also, well, speaking of the format of the data that you put online, this should also be kind of understandable, and that requires more or less unified metadata, so to say. And this is one of the things that, like, a certain society, like working on particular technique, should work together to develop a unified format of the metadata, so that it can be easily convertible and proven as well, like that the data are not fraud data.
Christoph, do you want to jump in?
Yes, regarding negative results, since 2014, this was an open option in Europe. So there has always been this category that we introduced. We were among the first major journals to accept negative results, and very few papers we published on this. So, I mean, the option is there. So if authors want to submit negative results, they can, but they don't. So maybe it's wishful thinking, and people don't want to spend time writing a paper and describing negative results. Although I insisted many times on my editorials that science is both negative and positive results, and the NIH is driving and putting some incentive for people to publish their negative results, because otherwise they get to fund the same projects again and again, the same hypothesis, which turns out to be not good. So you need to know, the community needs to know. And what we do, however, publish also is registered reports. And once the paper is accepted at the registered report stage, now, even if the outcome is negative, the paper is published as long as the authors just followed their own guidelines in terms of what they would do. So we publish also registered reports, which can be negative, these ones.
Well, I have a question. I have so many questions. I love this. Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
So is it is it because people don't know enough they can publish negative result? Is it because effort versus the effort that they put into publish something that's negative doesn't represent any kind of like a benefit they could get? Is it not like, why don't people do that if they could and get a publication, which would be kind of a reward, right? Because then you would be citable, but nobody wants to cite you. So in the end, everybody needs citations to get grants and so on and so forth. We know about all the issues about publishing. So what and how to fix this? What would be a good, like, here, that's what you get when you publish your negative results. Too many questions.
Someone from the panelists?
I don't know, maybe that was too messy.
So, I mean, I have a couple of points, and it may be a long answer to kind of get to that. And so I, you know, very much like you, was a PhD student about 6 years ago and thought there must be a better way. You know, we're spending a lot to publish. It's a huge amount of effort. We're also publishing or not publishing a ton of things that we actually do. And so I started a company during the last year of my PhD called The Winnower. And the idea was very much like F1000, started around the same time, where you would publish things first and then winnow the good from the bad via open post-publication peer review. So really what I saw as like an improvement is you have, you know, the world's experts critically discussing things, but it's behind closed doors and only, you know, 3, 4, 5 people ever see it. And so I wanted to kind of bring that forward. The challenge was, who's going to submit to this and why are they going to submit to this? So I think that comes to the incentive structure around negative results as well, right? You are not rewarded necessarily for publishing this thing. It's also costly, slow, you know, it's a lot of work to publish, right? It is not something you just put up. And so I really like the idea of that. I love micro publications and nano publications. And I think like maybe one day this is something we try to adopt at site because I think you need a why first, and the why can't just be for the betterment of like, you know, the world, because we all have rents or mortgages and things like this, and it's very, you know, competitive environment. With that said, like I like an individual kind of experiment that could be put up to kind of help solve for that kind of huge laborious part, and it could start to weave together and do different, you know, people's eyes, and you kind of have like this nice amalgamation of it. And so I think a lot of, you know, new initiatives in scholarly publishing really have to kind of look at why is someone going to do this, and have to like be brutally honest and like almost cynical and you know, answer that. And if you can't answer that, you know, it probably won't, you know, be enough to get people to submit to those things. And that relates a little bit to, you know, what we're trying to do at Site. And so Site is, you know, an extension kind of the Winnower, and actually the idea was published on the Winnower because I didn't want to deal with all this publishing, right? It's like, I don't want to, you know, spend all this time trying to get this idea out. I think it's just an idea. But basically what Site is, you know, trying to show that, you know, not all citations are equal. So if you look at a paper that has 100 citations within my field of chromosome segregation and aneuploidy, I would know which of those citations maybe had tested the paper and either shown to support it or contrast it. But if I leave my immediate field, I don't have that kind of inside information. And so I use citations very superficially, which is why I think we don't like citations, right? So a high number is good, a low number is not so good. And so what we've done at Site is to analyze millions of articles, 26 million articles at this point, extract out the in-text citation from them so that you can see what does the literature say about this. And the idea is to start to say it's not just about how many times you've been cited, but how you've been cited. Have you been supported? Have you been contrasted? And one thing that we've seen is, you know, we classify citations as providing, supporting, or contrasting evidence. Most are mentioning, so most don't fit that. So not everyone's trying to be novel. They're trying to do something new. Supporting is about 5%, and I mean supporting with evidence, not just like nice positive sentiment. Contrasting are exceedingly rare, like 0.6%, you know, 1% depending upon the field. And that is because of the social structures, right? If we're in the same field, what incentive is it for me to come out and say, I couldn't reproduce your, you know, results because you're going to review my paper, or you're going to review my grant or my tenure and promotion. And so I think a lot of people, you know, deal with this by not citing, and, you know, because that's kind of how we penalize. And I think that's a worse system because we're missing out on a ton of things. And, you know, it's funny because like we can now search our citation statements, and I found one from like 80 years ago, where it's like this paper of an author saying this person didn't cite me, but, you know, here's this thing. And so I think the incentive structure, you know, matters a lot, because technically it's very easy to do all these things, right? It's just like answering why are we going to do that? And I think I'm very optimistic that we should try and do all these experiments. I don't want to like give the impression that, you know, I'm some cynic and we shouldn't try anything. Like, I think we need more experiments. It's just you have to think why, and the why is not just because we're good people.
I think one point that comes is the money, right? Like, we need to acquire money as scientists, and it's always like, oh, did you got cited well, or do you have like published in a high impact factor? I was wondering, Liz, you are in contact regularly with like grant givers. Do you have any ideas how we as scientific community could engage and like tell them that they shouldn't look at the impact factor, but just on the ideas or like the research itself?
That's a big question. So for those who, just for a bit of background, I used to work at a funding agency. So I spent over a decade working in research evaluation. So looking at what happened to funding grants and how what came out of them. And then I moved to F1000, which is a scholarly publisher, about 5 years ago. And we've been trying to be doing some quite innovative stuff to support the publication of all types of research output across different parts of the research process. So methods and protocols and data articles, all peer reviewed. And we have a slightly tailored peer review process for each of those. I was really interested in what you presented, Hannes, because you're obviously thinking about some of those similar things about publishing different parts of the research process that typically are hidden or you never find out about them. And there's a lot of waste as a funder. That's one of the things that funders are really keen to do, is avoid waste in the system. So if things that they've funded aren't published, and that does include negative and null results. So I do think it has traditionally been difficult to publish negative and null findings in the journals, but it's not because the funders, as far as I understand, don't want those published. It's just the routes to get that work out have traditionally been through a journal system that has some of the wrong incentives built into it, or you know, a legacy system that doesn't easily allow you to publish things that aren't potentially higher impact, and all the kinds of issues with the journal system. So I think what I'm seeing happening now is a lot of funders, particularly in Europe and America, and I'm again, it's not a global, it's not equal across the globe, and it is creating problems. But quite a number of funders are now trying to make the statement that it's not just about positive findings; it's about making sure that the work that they funded is out there and shared. The challenge is how to do that in ways that are discoverable and useful. And the other challenge that I do see, and somebody talked about it, one of the things that worries me about F1000 and every other publisher is, and grant agencies, we push an awful lot of work to peer reviewers. And we have a very old system of peer review that really is quite a blunt instrument. And we all use similar but quite different submission systems and processes. And we ask lots of different questions when we could be a bit more synchronized. And so I think there's a huge waste in the whole peer review system. And the challenge we've got is, while there are opportunities to share research in much more holistic ways now, you can put stuff onto preprint servers, you can do this, you can publish in new journals, you can share all parts of your research process, we still rely on a peer review system that is very burdensome. And the more we put out there, the more pressure we put on peer reviewers. So I actually think one thing that would be really great as part of the future is to overhaul the whole peer review system. I'm not saying we don't need expert views on research, but I think in the whole grant system, in the whole way we peer review research, it's unsustainable, it's unhelpful, and there are lots of disincentives in the whole system to do that. So I think that's something that I would like to see as well. And funders are starting to look at that, but the funders need to do this as well as publishers, as well as institutions. It needs to be thought about as a whole system, in my view, and that's still not happening enough.
Do you have some good ideas how to improve peer review system?
So there are a number of publishers are playing with thinning down the questions they ask, making sure that they're not asking for any extra pieces of information, trying to deter reviewers from saying, have you looked at this? Have you looked at this? And doing extra work. So some publishers really particularly are looking at making sure that the things that they're being asked to peer review are very tight and very easy for the reviewer to do. So that I do see that coming across some publishers. Some grant agencies are also looking at ways of simplifying the process of getting your work peer reviewed and not asking the grant holder or the grant applicant for so much information. So basically getting decisions made much more quickly on a smaller piece of information before submitting it to a whole process. So basically reducing the burden of applying for a grant and reviewing the grant. So looking at how to simplify things as well. But yeah, I'm not sure there are lots of examples out there, but it's not very widely used. And I think some of the post-publication peer review model that we're trying to use is interesting too, because perhaps not everything needs peer reviewing. We peer review everything before we trust it, and I'm not sure that that's always that we always need to do it in quite the same way.
Please go ahead with your questions. You can just go and ask.
I have a question about the funding agencies. Do they ever have someone that looks at the papers objectively and then evaluate if they are really worth, like the funding or not? Because it can be in a high impact paper, and maybe the research is not that high impact, I mean, you may have some paper in Nature or something, but it's not like really worthy of publishing in Nature or something like that. So do they ever have someone that looks at the paper objectively and then evaluate if they deserve the grant or not? Does it ever happen?
Well, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of funding agencies everywhere. There are some examples of that. I think you're right. The challenge is that the outputs of research have traditionally been papers. So those are all that the funding agencies haven't really got a lot of other information apart from somebody's track record. And that's what in time limit, they are also, people in grant agencies are also very time limited. So people make judgments based on small pieces of information. So, if a Nature paper is listed, even though the agencies now say, don't just look at that. And a lot do say, please don't look at where it's published, look at what it's published. But most people on those panels might not have the time to really delve into the actual reading every article. And so tools, the kinds of things that Josh is creating, those kinds of tools more generally, and overview insights of the outputs of research, whether it's a positive result or people need shortcuts. There is so much information out there. People do need shortcuts, but they need shortcuts they can trust. So yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, Machabi. Is that what you're, Machaba? That's a really good question. I don't think it is done systematically, and you're quite right. Where you publish doesn't mean it's of a perfect value. So it's all about, a lot of funding agencies use the phrase, it's the intrinsic value of research that's important, not where it's published. But the challenge is to get over that and provide a way for someone to be able to do that.
Okay.
Could I jump in here and ask another question? I think one common theme that appeared a few times now was is the incentives for publishing negative results, for even attempting replications that might not be original, or also for engaging in peer review if you could just not do it. Or maybe also, that's maybe even more relevant in your case, Liz, is why engage in post-publication peer review, or why care about what people say after I've published, since now I've published, now I got my reward. Now I have my entry, and that's kind of it. And I think that's a thing it comes down to a lot. And I wonder what new incentives we can set to, maybe, I guess you've thought about this much more than I did, what incentives to set for publishing negative results or engaging in peer review as reviewer or as author.
I think I can jump in for some things. So, there's now tools that track the number of peer reviews you've done. There's Publons that will show how many peer reviews you've done. It's hard to tell the quality of those things, but I can imagine, it's evolving and changing. And so that was something that was not tracked too much before. I think, various journals did publish a list of the reviewers in the year into certain journals, that could mean something. And so that has, helped. I think people are now starting to, give DOIs to these data sets. And so these can be cited, they can be listed on your CV, they can be listed on your bio sketch. And so it's really starting to just kind of count all these different outputs in the same way. And I don't think they're all perfect, but at least it's starting to look. And that's one thing that we actually did quite successfully at the Winnower was, hey, there's a ton of like outreach, like blogs, student essays, journal clubs, even Reddit science AMAs. As a scientist, you're kind of actively told not to do this, right? That's not a publication that you can put on your CV. So why should you engage with the public about your science? And so what we did was, to give a digital object identifier and permanent archival to these things. We kind of made them into papers in a way, which is, a bit silly, but also helped a lot. And I think, that kind of, it's not enough to just give it a DOI and then everything counts. But I think, that's a good first step to making these things citable. And then at Cite, we're trying to kind of change the fact that you must get highly cited, right? And so my main PhD work has 55 citations, and there's 2 supporting citations from independent groups. And so I think now I can, objectively say, here's 2 papers from different labs that supported my work. And I think that can be quite powerful to start to change. I care about being right, as opposed to I care about being flashy. And I think, to get into certain journals, you need a flashy story that they can go out and kind of market in a way. And so it's not simple, though. I think it's just starting to look at these things, track them, and over time. See some hands, so I'll be quiet.
Yeah, Christoph, do you want to say something?
Yes, so we've been thinking with other publishers about publishing data sets, because that's a key thing. There's a very easy way to acknowledge the work of people. For example, some person may have spent 3 years generating a data set which is curated and usable by the community. So now if you publish it somewhere and you have a DOI for that and you are cited, that could count into your CV when you apply for a new position. Okay, so that's one aspect. That's something I liked very much in what was shown in this poster at the beginning. I don't know where this statement is coming from, that most research is not published. At least in my field, this is not my experience at all. It's most research is published. So there are some negative results, yes, which are not published. Now, why are they not published? I don't know. Each time I go to give a talk in the university or somewhere, I also meet with all the students, postdoc, even young PIs and PhD students and master students, to tell them how the publication world is working or not working as it is. And I tell them about publishing negative results. And all PhD students and postdoc tell me, well, I would love to publish my negative results, because if I spent a year or 2 and it ended up not confirming the hypothesis, yes, I would like to publish it anyway, because I worked on that and I need to be recognized for the work I did. So in fact, when you talk to recruiting committees or people, they would be happy to have a paper, even if it's negative result, to show that one person has worked on a project. This is very important for their future career. So negative result is not a negative point. You publish something. Now, why it's not published, I have no idea. And the last comment that I want to make is a very interesting paper published in PNAS today or yesterday, that addresses an issue that you have not mentioned, but that is the key. And the key, so this paper is, I'm going to send it to all. It's from Chu and Evans. So they analyzed 90 million papers, okay? And 1.8 billion citations. And from their analysis, what is clear is that because of the explosion of labs, of PIs, of researchers, of journals that we saw during the past 10, 20 years, there is a huge amount of things which are published. I am totally unable to follow my own field, right? I'm not even looking at what is published in journals that I know nothing about. So I don't even know what is being published. And the side effect of this is that people tend to cite always the same papers. And they don't cite the new stuff. And you should read this paper because it's really pointing at one major problem that we have in science in general. This flurry of things which are published everywhere, but we cannot access them. So as a result, there is a huge bias towards something that is published that is dogmatic most of the time or sclerotic, and that prevents the progression of the field. So for me, this is the major problem to solve first for science progression.
Thank you. Mutaba?
Well, I'm just saying that there is one website called PubPeer, which is kind of post-publication feedback or post-publication review. So we can actually go there and challenge someone for real, you know, and it can lead to retraction or something like that. So it happens a lot. So those websites exist. The post-publication feedback or peer review exists. I mean, it's not just it's not really common, but I know that it's there. But it's kind of common in biology and chemistry because, you know, that's where you can actually get to the grips of the crude data and challenge the hypothesis, and then you may also try to maybe reproduce the work in your own lab. If it doesn't work, then you can go there and then see that actually I've tried, it did not work for me. And also I know that, okay, so that's when it comes to the post-publication feedback. But also I know that in chemistry there is what you call organic synthesis, where they repeat your work, and if it doesn't work as you said, then they never publish it. But no one publishes there. That's why it has such a low impact factor. I guess it's like 0.3 or something, because no one goes there, you know, because it has to fit what you say. You know, if you say that actually I got like 100% yield, and then they end up with 60%, that means you may have lied, and it might lead to rejecting your paper. So I mean, so those two models are really nice, and I would love to see them in many fields. Just one more thing, and also, so in chemistry, people don't usually publish negative data because it has to be flashy. You know, you need to have good yields and stuff like that, and you need to have nice compounds. So yeah, it's not really common to publish negative data in chemistry. So yeah, so that's my third comment. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's true.
Can I share and ask something? I really like what I thought it was super interesting what you said, Christoph, that, you know, then usually the dogmatic papers are going to be like cited because nobody can catch up with literature. So I was trying to connect this also to the peer review, and like so many things being published, nobody can catch up with literature, where to do, what to do, who's checking things. So if in my experience, quite often it's like this, that young scientists, they question what their PIs are doing. So they are more into like questioning, okay, this is what you believe, but I have these results that don't support it. While the older scientists go for this, they want to confirm their hypothesis. So the younger ones are often, because they don't have the power, they don't get the money. So they are often also like, yeah, no, we don't publish this because we need to publish really high. So they are frustrated, PhD students and so on and so forth. They would like to have something smaller to be published. But the PIs often like suppress these things. And then coming to like so many papers coming out, the peer review system being like having the trouble as well, like we need the experts. So the big PIs, they don't have time. They put it on the PhD students or the postdocs, but they never get credit for it. Do you in some way think all these kind of things can be combined and get like the forces from, you know, the younger scientists that are also more flexible in their minds? They want to publish, they want to do something good, to somehow give them better incentives to do peer review and then like and publish negative results, to kind of couple all these issues that we have, and more like, you know, don't look for the experts, the big fish that are supposed to review and peer review and get the credit on Pablons, but the small ones as well. Do you think these things can somehow be like coupled and combined into something? Does that make sense?
It already exists. That's what we set up. That's why society are good for. Societies are at the service of scientists, not the commercial journals. Okay. So the Society for Neuroscience has developed a mentorship program for anyone who wants to be trained to be a reviewer, starting at the PhD level. So you can register to this mentorship program, which is free for members, and you're being trained to review papers. As soon as you are certified, then you are entered in the database. And most of the time now in my journal, my reviewing editors, which are other scientists, they like to use these mentees because they have the best reviews. In fact, I'm not talking about in-depth, very detailed, whatever. No, they go to the point, what is important and what needs to be done to make a solid story. That's it. That's how they are trained. So it exists.
Okay, so this is the credit.niso.org, what you just sent. Or what do you mean?
No, I didn't send that. But if you go to SFN website
that was me.
and you type
That was me.
The mentorship program, then anyone can enter the mentorship program. So my philosophy as an editor-in-chief is to bet everything on the new generation, because the old generation is too sclerotic.
Yes.
It's dead. So I'm betting everything on the young people, not on the old people.
So you have it specifically for the Journal of Neuroscience. Do you know if these incentives are for other journals as well, if these things exist? Because I don't know, because that's awesome.
I don't know.
There's other groups. There's pre-review, which is a group that I'm involved in. There's a lot of there's multiple groups now at this point training, different reviewers. I think there's still, things don't happen overnight. And so finding a way to trust like these peer reviewers and also to find them, right, can still be a challenge. And so, internally, it sounds like they have a great system set up, but I think this is just starting to emerge in other fields.
Yeah.
Could I ask a question specifically about exactly this? And maybe you, Christoph, as editor-in-chief, maybe you have an opinion on this. What I see when I publish is that we suggest reviewers and then they will be picked for review, and not whoever passed a mentorship or is in any register as a reviewer, which obviously I think to some extent defeats the entire purpose of having an unbiased peer review. What do you have an opinion on? Do you even do this in your journal, or do you have an opinion on how this should be handled?
You mean the choice of reviewers?
Yeah, that often it is suggested reviewers which will be chosen as reviewers, and you can sometimes even exclude.
No, usually what I was doing when I was a reviewing editor for general science or even for science, I was not using the suggestions of the authors. If it was my first feeling of who would be the good reviewers, then I would still use them. But otherwise, I have my own set of names that I trust and I contact. And if there are new mentees, so usually what we do is to pair a mentee, a very young person, with an established reviewer. And the nice thing about the in Eurosystem, it's like eLife, which for me is the best system that exists for peer review, is that it's a dialogue between the reviewers and the reviewing editors, and they have to reach a consensual decision regarding the paper. They talk to each other. This is why, for example, since the beginning of the year, I received one appeal for a rejection. One. Now, journals like, the commercial publishers, they receive tens per week. Okay.
I understand. Yeah, I think that's a good response. I think it's helpful. Yeah.
I would say also, just to build on that, so my main work was published in eLife, and it was nice to go through that review, and a very nice output of that was this essay that people could read, and you could see who reviewed it. And so there were some giants in the field that reviewed my PhD work, and it's like, wow, here's this reviewer from this National Academy member that I think is something I could explicitly point to before it had any citations or anything. And so I think that's a nice benefit of this, as well as, you can kind of see what these experts think, but then you can also point to it as, hey, this has been reviewed by some leaders in the field, or, emerging scientists as well.
We've got, and I think eLife do it really well. And I've been a reviewer for eLife, and I kind of enjoyed that process. It was less burdensome, although it did take a bit of time, to be fair, as a peer reviewer anyway. But that's, you feel more inclined to help out if you know that it's going to be a nice process. With what we've been doing at F1000 as well, and I'm not saying this is the perfect way. We encourage the co-reviewing, like Christoph mentioned, and we actually name the co-reviewers. So because our peer review is entirely open, we encourage any co-reviewers we encourage the person that's invited to review to actually look if there are any people that they want to include in that. So the postdocs, which they typically are, they're named. If they want to be, it's all optional. They have to be named, but if they want to review, they can be named. And we try to get ORCID IDs for all of the reviewers, and the peer reviewer comments themselves that actually have their own DOI and they're citable. Now, we haven't seen peer review reports being cited an awful lot, but I wonder in the future whether those kinds of context pieces in certain circumstances might be useful. Just because you can make something have a DOI and be citable doesn't necessarily mean you should, but we've been trying to do that because, again, one of the key issues with peer review is it takes a lot of time and it's a very hidden part of the whole process, and it's such an important thing. So we've been trying to give visibility to everybody in the process, including the authors and all the reviewers involved in that. I just wanted to flag credit. I just put that in there. It's not a perfect thing by any stretch of the imagination, but a number of publishers are now using this taxonomy that was partly developed out of some work that I did with someone at Harvard while I was at Wellcome, and we were trying to make sure that information around the authors, better information about the contributions of different authors was captured. It's not a perfect list, but most publishers, or a very large number of publishers, are now capturing structured information around the authors to say what roles they did from a taxonomy of roles. So that's also captured in the XML of that article. So it's not great searching yet, but it will be there, and it's being linked to ORCID now. So articles that have ORCID and credit roles assigned that are deposited in ORCID, you'll be able to look at. So this person did, was the data curator on this article. This person was the, and you can have multiple roles, of course. But what it moves away from is the concept of author is the person who wrote it, when we know that actually there are tons of contributions to that work that isn't just about writing articles. And it helps to break down that hierarchy of first author, last author, when it's all, we know that can be a problem too. So that's what credit started to do. Like I say, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's attempting to shine a light on the different contributions of different people to research.
I thought it's also interesting, like all the platforms and that are presented here are like not the traditional way of publishing, but what I saw is that the peer review process is different in like the different journals. I think in ENEO you have a double blind peer review, and then you have the open peer review or the community-based peer review. So I was wondering, why is it that we don't find a good or the best way yet of peer reviewing, and what do you think where it is heading, if you have any idea, or what's your favorite way of peer reviewing? Has anyone thought about that?
If there were a perfect way, it would be already done. So when I created in Euro, being a scientist and fed up being mistreated by journals, I wanted to have a system where I would be happy publishing and not being frustrated. So I tried to imagine the solutions that could be good, like the double blind system, which is nice. We verified, for example, that we are absolutely purely gender equal, because there is a bias against women as first authors and last authors, but with the double blind system, we are perfectly equal. So there were things which were introduced, which improved stuff, but regarding the peer review system, it cannot be perfect, first because it's based on humans, and humans are imperfect. There is a lot of talk about post-publication review and inviting comments from the community. I don't know. I have no solution to that. I can give you a very simple counter argument to that. It's the danger that it can create. And this happened to us despite the fact that it was reviewed. So I'm not going to tell you who and even the topic. I'm going to change the topic, but just to give you an idea, it's like someone is sending a paper and it is published because it went through peer review, saying that because this area tempesta is smaller in women in their brain, it explains why they are weaker and less intelligent than men. Okay, that was that kind of thing. And there was it was reviewed and accepted. So it was not said as bluntly. But then that was picked up by news agencies, and it went wild on Twitter and generated a huge fuss. Of course, this is not the topic, right? I'm just changing the topic, but it created havoc. All right. So imagine now someone saying, well, people with crook nose, they are Jews, and they must be eliminated. If there is no control by the peer system, that kind of thing can happen, especially in our modern society, where everything is immediate, goes to Twitter instantly, and can generate a chain reaction with really bad consequences. And you saw people being killed after fake news being disseminated on Twitter. So I'm not saying there is a good solution. I think that the peer review system as it is now, it's imperfect, but at least there are some kind of protections against these misbehavior, because you will have always people wanting to hurt other people or communities, and will go bad.
Do you think then that like platforms like bioRxiv shouldn't be open for everyone, just for scientists? Or because that creates the same problem, right? Like also we saw it in the pandemic that not peer-reviewed paper could also taken up by the news, and then they are spread until they are peer-reviewed, and like everyone in the news forgets about it, even though they maybe change. Shouldn't be open for journalists.
This is I think it doesn't even have to be so malicious. So there's, constantly preprints are being tweeted out, and there's one recently that made a big claim, and I said, okay, if you're going to make this big a claim and it's going to be broadcast to the head of Medscape, it should be very, that's worrisome. And so I looked at cites, and I searched this claim. So we can search citation statements, and you can quickly find like papers, and immediately I found counterclaims to it. And so this paper had one figure and like 9 references, and it was from some reputable authors. I just think it wasn't a full story, and so there's a rush to say this thing and to get it out, and then it's broadcast to the news. And another thing, because we can identify contrasting citations, I recently looked at, okay, let's look at COVID-19 papers that have been contrasted, and there's some that you can find, or preprints or papers, that have altmetric scores like you wouldn't believe, like in the top 1 percentile. They've been on every news channel. And then they're later contrasted by a paper that no one's gonna like, well, not no one, but the impact will be much less. And so this feedback or like correction mechanism can happen with preprints, within preprints, or within papers, but it often doesn't get the attention. And I don't think there's like a simple solution to this, because some of the correction comes from preprints, and you also see these kind of misclaims or sloppy science being broadcast from journals as well. And so I think it's the challenge though now is a lot of it is going directly to the public, and we all care about COVID right now because it's impacted all of our lives, whereas that probably wasn't so true pre-pandemic. And so I think it's complex. It's, I guess, my throw my hands up in the air response.
Now, can I ask a question here, Josh? Since I knew you on the panel, I wanted to ask you a question. But maybe that goes for everyone who is involved in publishing, so I guess all the panelists. I really like the idea of cite, that you, and for already just the simple feature that you get the context of the reference. I think this is very valuable. What I'm wondering is if the kind of the counterpart to that could be part of publishing in the future, which would be, if I were to click on a reference, it would take me to a specific sentence or a figure in the paper, but not just to a paper, because what we find a lot is that you click on the reference, you find the paper, you pass the paywalls. This paper again cites another paper, and this piece of information that was kind of claimed in the first paper you're reading isn't actually anywhere. You have to follow a very long paper trail. So citing an individual segment or figure, I think that would be very valuable. Is there anything that you're thinking about?
I think so. I think, it's hard to, so I mean, there's a lot of challenges with what we do. One is not all papers are open. So you need to get access to the papers first. And, publishers are used to selling this for a lot of money. And so we've done 26 million articles, which is a ton, but it's not everything, right? And we do have open access. So one is just the challenge of getting it. Two is that, once you get it, it comes in so many different formats and quality. There's so many different styles of PDFs. You have to be able to text mine this out. And so just to be able to get the context, which you see today, is tremendously complex, right? There's a lot of machine learning that goes into doing that. And it's also pretty amazing. There's one that I saw, 100-year-old like contrasting citation statement. And I was just like, it's from a Royal Society article where we do have an indexing agreement. And I was amazed that our tool could actually get this out. And so I think what you're describing is certainly valuable. And I've discussed this with other people that are trying to do it. It just takes that, already complex thing a step further. With that said, though, I think people have tried to do what Scite has done for many years. It's just the tools weren't there. And so the tools, I think to do these complex things will evolve. And I do think you'll be able to like kind of link to that. There's also, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was actually thinking that this might be a maybe requirement for authors in the future, but now you're saying we could actually reverse engineer this and maybe kind of figure out what authors meant with machine learning or whatever tool you're using to get to this figure or claim in the original paper.
So I think there's been a couple different approaches to like what we do. One is like ask the authors and have them do it, right? Mark next to each reference what they, what type of reference this is or citation. Are they using this? Are they citing this? It's just that becomes onerous, right? And it's already onerous. Like the credit taxonomy, I just went through this recently. I'm like, oh my God, now I have to do this. Now I have to do this. Now I have to do this. The checklist is becoming longer and longer, not shorter and shorter. And people, have approached kind of like give the authors to do this. There's another, company or platform called Social Site, which was kind of like, let's look at references and you can vote on them and say what they are. And this was just too much. And it goes back to what, what Christoph said, the scale and the volume of literature is crazy now. And so asking people to do, yet another thing becomes challenging. So I think it needs to be a mixture. It can't all be machine because the machines are not going to be perfect for any of this, but it can't all be human because there's just way too much. The scale is too immense. And so if you can have, some of this balance, it becomes more feasible in my mind.
Thank you. The hour is nearly gone. I want to ask one last question from the audience, and this is, have you seen significant changes in the academic publishing during your career? Someone wants to answer on this.
I think the biggest growth is probably the growth of the preprint kind of movement, right? So people, and that's being driven by a few different factors. I think there's sort of pushes and pulls from my perspective. One is people are fed up with the time it takes to get work published. There's also an imperative to get work out quickly as well, especially as we've seen in pandemic situations. But actually, this has been something that the physics community has been doing for a long time. So it's a case of like learning from what works in other areas. Can we apply that? Can we be a bit more consistent? And yeah, so that's what I think what we've seen is the growth of a model that had been being used within the physics and the life and the natural sciences communities for a long time, being now applied into different ways. And obviously the way people can share their research through not just preprints, because in a way preprint servers still, you still publish an article, it still very much feels like an early publisher, but actually there are new formats to share work as well, so new platforms. I do think we're going to see a burgeoning of alternative ways to share research in the next near future, and that might be just put your data somewhere that everyone can discover. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I would echo that. Yeah, I mean, I think preprints has obviously been, a big change, especially in biomedical literature publishing, which is a huge amount of publishing. It still is like a fraction though. So even though it's like exploded, right, still most are not preprinted. And so it'd be interesting to see how these things evolve. There's certain challenges, and I think, we need to address some of those, because it's not just preprint and everything's fixed. It does fix some things with speed and openness, but then there's other challenges of how do you know what is something you can rely on? There's multiple copies of it across preprint servers, things like this. And so but I think preprints is my short answer.
But do you know how it works with physics? Because that's how it was used the first time.
Yes, so I'm aware of that.
And it works in physics. So basically you place a paper and the community is now so used to review the paper that the paper is being reviewed by multiple people, and the authors can just answer the questions and once everyone agrees that now it's great. Most of the time, the paper, when it is sent, 80% of the time, when it is sent to a journal, it is automatically accepted because the reviewing editor sees the whole history and that it doesn't need further peer review. Now, if the community of science, of life science, could do the same thing, that would solve a lot of problems.
On this line, I heard something recently about, it's not exactly like that, but there's some sort of trend of, decoupling basically the reviewing process from the publishing process. And there is this platform called, I think it's called Review Commons. It's from specific journals. It was organized from them, but I see more and more people, or more and more journals trying to move in that direction. So the idea is that you have reviewers like review the article, and then only after reviewing it's completely different journals, try to track or some sort of, I'm not entirely sure how it works, but I heard it's kind of like that, or there is some sort of editor that decides what journal fits best or something like that, which I think is a nice idea. It's really hard to motivate people though to review something. I don't know exactly how it works in practice, but the whole idea of having something reviewed before you even publish is better for both, the community and the authors themselves, because you get to see the comments as well. You get to see what are the directions you can follow or something like that.
I think we need to end our discussion here because the hour is over. Thank you so much for joining us today and being in the panel discussing the future of scientific publishing. And if you want to have more information, please visit crastina.se. We have interviews with Christoph and Josh there, and we will add Hannes' flowchart if you want to see it again. And you can also find the flowchart from F1000, how they publish there. So please visit the website if you want to see more. And thank you for today and all the questions and the nice discussion.